Living in Virginia, you're in the fast lane on the information superhighway. We've invested $3 billion in Virginia's broadband network to give you one of the fastest internet connection speeds in the world, so you can build relationships, bring new business to our state, and meet the future of education. It's amazing what we can do together. Visit VCTA.com to learn how broadband connects the Commonwealth.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. We're really pleased to have two members from the Norfolk area. Senator Lionel Spruill, good to see you, sir.
Good morning, sir. Good to be here.
Delegate Steve Heretick, good to see you again.
Good to be back, Woody. Thank you.
Senator Spruill, you've had some legislation dealing with minimum wage as it results to shoe shine boys and barbershops.
Yes. That pertaining to, we figure in this day and time, the shoe shine boy, we call it the Jim Crow area.
Yes.
The shoe shine boy, the bus boy, and as far as the wage, they would work for a company. And they were, yet what they were getting paid was not minimum wage. And we were saying, hey, what's the deal here? Now, if you would allow them to come in on their own time, and I will pay you for let me be in your shop, then on my own. But we were finding out they work for the company, but for tips, whatever they got. And we were saying that they should be on minimum wage. So we're trying to get rid of that stigma of a shoe shine boy, because mainly you were talking about blacks, bus boy, and that kind of stuff. And we were saying that they should be minimum wage. If they in that company, then they should get at least the minimum wage like everybody else.
And Delegate Heretick, it's a little bit ironic that we're celebrating the 400th year of the initiation of the House of Burgess, which has now developed into the General Assembly. We're still talking about these issues.
You know, I think one thing that Virginia history teaches us, no matter how far back we go, is that we have a long history of racism. We have a long legacy of inequality. And those are things I think that we have to confront in our history. You know, 2019 is the 400th anniversary of four important things in Virginia. The first importation of slaves, the first importation of women, the first sitting of the Virginia General Assembly, and with apologies to our friends in Massachusetts, the real first Thanksgiving in Virginia. But I think as we're coming up on this anniversary, we really have to look at our history in the eye. We have to call it for what it is, and we have to resolve as a common people to move past all that.
And of course, this is Black History Month, and we're celebrating a lot of accomplishments by African Americans, including yourself.
Yes, Lord. Remind me of this Black History Month and what's going on. We are not focusing on that, but I give credit in the Senate. The white members in the Senate, they are taking it among themselves to get on the floor, talking about the things, the accomplishments in the Black History Month as they see fit. And we are saying that let's focus on what we're trying to do with the Black History Month, and they are doing those things on the floor. So we are satisfied now that all across the country, we're talking about Black History Month, and the members in the Senate, the white members, they are all, every day, one gets to the floor and talk about that.
And in the meantime, the business of the people goes on. I know you've got some legislation dealing with absentee voting, for example.
Yes. Now, could you believe after all this time, that bill is no excuse absentees. What happened was, you got to lie. Say, next Tuesday, my ear gonna hurt, so I got to come in and vote early. And what it was saying is it would be the second Saturday prior to the election. You should go in and vote, and no excuse. You had to make up no medical excuse and no reason at all. And we were saying that also would save time, the long lines that you were having. So we were saying, why are you forcing them to get that form? And on the back, you 1A or B, you check, and you got the 99 times you can lie that they got to check that box. We said no excuse. The second Saturday before the election. And that seems to be getting out. I had a second part to that, but saying there's no excuse as far as the mail-in part. But it went to the House, and they laid my bill over somebody else, and so we compromised to do one of them. So we can go in and vote early, starting off, and this is a start, and that's something that everybody can live with. Let's go in early, and later on we're hoping that later on it will change like everywhere else.
So we should make voting easier than harder.
Well, that's my philosophy too. I mean, I agree with Senator Spruill. I don't know why you have to have an excuse to vote early. You know, and especially when you look at senior citizens, you look at handicapped citizens, you look at people who might not be physically able to stand in line on an election day, or as we're taping this, it's raining cats and dogs outside. I mean, people, you know, sometimes want to be able to cast their votes early and go on about their business, go to work, go to doctor's appointments. And I think to the senator's point, I mean, why do we have to have excuses to vote early? It should be something it's our right to do.
And of course, voting rights is in the air. It's been in the air for years here, especially in terms of redistricting. And right now, there's a matter in court that's subject to a map that's been approved by the federal district court. It's going to effect some changes, is it not?
A whole lot of changes. But the key of this, could you believe that we were sending our young men and women overseas to give other people's rights, to have votes, whatever it is, rights, and here back home, all these restrictions. And as far as the redistricting you're talking about, yes, they were concerned about impacting all the African Americans all together, and so we spread it out in this way. We were saying, hey, the line, are they drawing fairly? that everybody can go in the right, as far as the African Americans have a choice to vote where they live, and we were saying not impact them all together. So this way, we think that way we can pick up more seats in the General Assembly.
And of course, Delegate Heretick, you are personally impacted by this change, are you not?
Yes, I am. And Woody, most of my district is going to be substantially changed. I, as you know, live in Portsmouth, was a Portsmouth City Councilman for a while. I am losing not quite all of my constituents in Portsmouth. I'm picking up, I'm proud to say, a lot of new folks in Norfolk. And for the first time, I'm picking up voters in Western Branch of Chesapeake. But about 85% of my voters will be brand new coming into this election this year. So once the session ends, it's going to be a lot of work for us to do, a lot of doors to knock, a lot of people to meet. But, you know, we are happily accept the challenge. I mean, I've always enjoyed, you know, meeting new voters and learning their issues. And, you know, it's like everything else. We have to earn the privilege to serve. And part of that is working hard, campaigning hard, meeting the people who brought us to office, and making sure that we stay connected and current with what their needs are.
And Senator, I understand that the Tidewater area is generally affected by these changes, not on the Senate side, but on the House side.
Yeah, well, true, because the most of the African American votes either in Hampton Roads, which include Tidewater, Richmond, and we don't say North Virginia, but Richmond on down towards Tidewater, and that's where it is, and we are concerned about that. And also, as far as one good thing about him, the 85% he was talking about, and he's a smooth talker. He's good. So if you look at this record, that he should be able to sustain that. And we are hoping that from the African American point of view, we are saying, look at this record, and we're going to make sure that people like him who looks out for everybody to get reelected.
What about this whole issue around redistricting and who should be drawing those lines? For years, there's been a debate about that. There are some bills in play right now that could potentially wind up on the ballot in a few years.
Well, if you can get Delegate Cole,
Mark Cole,
who is chairman of P&E, that some bills that will come to before now, that he wouldn't even allow the bill to even be heard in the committee. And so I got to be nice because I'm on TV. But he would not, and we were saying, hey, wait a minute. Doesn't matter who put the bill in. If the bill is not to his liking, to his part of the advantage, it wouldn't even allow it to come to the floor. Now, I don't know about what happened now with those bills, but because of the Supreme Court, they wish they had allowed those things to happen, because the bills that were drawn up, I don't know who drew those bills up, on either side of the, they had one to come to the P&E committee. They wish they had it because those bills were more relaxed than what the Supreme Court. You thought that the Supreme Court was all Democrats. Bless their heart, you thought they were Democrats, the way they drew the lines up. No disrespect to my brother here, they didn't look out for him. But you know, but as far as African Americans, you thought they were all Democrats. We were saying, they drew the lines much straighter than what we thought that we had. We love the way they drew those lines.
And apparently the chairman of privileges and elections has his own bill that would keep it in the hands of the members of the General Assembly, generally, to continue to draw those lines, as I understand it.
Yeah, you're largely right, Woody. And I'll tell you, it's commonly said that we should not be able to pick our voters. Our voters should be able to pick us. And, you know, I am one of the ones who had alternative proposals, which probably didn't get as much of a hearing as perhaps I would have liked. But nevertheless, I mean, I still kind of have problems with, you know, the leadership on both sides of the aisle that wants to continue to keep political hands around this process. Redistricting should be fair. It should be nonpartisan. It should you know, basically and fairly draw those lines. Sometimes we like where they may be, sometimes we might not. But nevertheless, we have to represent the voters that we were, you know, chosen to represent. And so I think Delegate Cole's bill, to Senator Spruill's point, continues to perpetuate the political control that certain members of the Assembly in the House and the Senate continue to have on this process, and to me that's not fair.
Now there's been a lot of controversy about pipelines, and you have legislation dealing with pipelines as well.
Yes, sir. The bill that I put in, that the pipeline is that through the SCC to make sure they are safe, what have you. And I am catching. Am I allowed to say hell on your show?
Yes, you are.
I am catching hell because I live in Chesapeake, and the pipeline was coming through my neighborhood, and they're putting the pipeline under the power line, the Virginia Power, those high power lines, and they're putting them anywhere from 4 to 5 feet away from the nearest house. And the concern that the people have is that what happened to that power line, the big ones, spark would hit, and those things no more than 3 or 4 feet in the ground could that cause a problem. And we're looking at all across the country, pipelines are boom, boom. We went to the SCC, they put them in the wetlands.
That's the State Corporation Commission.
That's right, I'm sorry, thank you. And we went through, we had the Attorney General come down looking at it, we had everybody look at it. And for some reason, we can't stop it because they're using the million powers right away. That's the excuse they're giving. And we are saying, hey, but is it safe? And it says not. The people in the community thought the General Assembly that we approved this. You see, it's not. They got that confused with the international, what's that called? International Coastal Pipeline. I think it was I think it called the International Coastal Pipeline, but this was Virginia Natural Gas is an offshoot of that we have no knowledge of. So we are saying to them, the bill that I put in, that you can't stop this bill, but from here on out, the SCC will make sure that when it's done, that the local government will have some say, and that the main thing was that are they safe, and make sure that they're safe to do.
And you have a lot of safety issues as a result of rising sea levels in your district that translate into the needs for improving bridges and tunnels, which translates into the issue of tolls. You know,
Woody, one of the greatest frustrations I think I have with the current budget that has been, you know, discussed in the House is that it strips out essentially all funding for sea level rise mitigation. My particular district is uniquely affected. I represent everything from the Navy base in Norfolk, all through all the major ports in Virginia, except for Newport News. I have Coast Guard commands. You know, my district is uniquely affected by sea level rise. And I can tell you that not so long ago, you get, you know, rain like we have today. It was no big deal. But the rain that we have today here in Richmond, I guarantee you, is flooding the streets of Norfolk. Now, what does that do? It affects our ability to you know, take our economy forward. I think it jeopardizes our port operations that we've spent over $1 billion in taxpayer revenue to sustain in the past several years. I think even when the United States Navy begins to take it seriously, it bothers me a great deal that our colleagues, some mostly on the other side of the aisle I might note, don't. And that affects all of us, not just in Hampton Roads, but remember, the ports of Virginia affect 10% of the Virginia economy. It's 10% of our workforce. And if we're forced to relocate those ports, or worse, if the shipping lines choose not to use us because of problems getting freight in and out of our ports because of sea level rise. First of all, we've spent a lot of money for nothing. But we're putting a lot of jobs and a lot of revenue at risk, and worse yet, if the Navy begins to look at alternatives to its presence in Norfolk and Virginia Beach and Portsmouth, we have a bigger problem still.
Senator Spruill, that port is critical to the economy of the Commonwealth,
Yes,
is it not?
they dredged the port 55 feet more to make sure that it will be the largest on the East Coast, I believe.
And the deepest.
And the deepest. And that means that we now can handle anything that come in there. But like I said, but if we don't have that, what's the problem we having? The rain in Norfolk, a cloud could go past Norfolk, shut the school down, flood it. And I make sure, and I have half of Norfolk. I don't drive my brand new Cadillac in Norfolk dock when it rains because of the flooding problem that he was talking about. So we have a serious problem there. So with that, and if the Navy pull out, you might be shutting Norfolk down.
Now, aren't there local ordinances that deal with the wake that's produced by cars during flooding?
And
I've read that somewhere. I don't know about in Norfolk, but I've read somewhere that
there are ordinances like that, Woody, but I'll tell you, they're awfully hard to enforce. You know, because again, sometimes if you're driving down the street, you know, you got water up to the top of your tires, you're going to create a wake. And what that does is it's, you know, splashes water into businesses, homes. I don't think there's any way short of shutting down streets that you can really stop that from happening. The bigger problem we have is simply drainage. You know, we don't have the resources to stop that flooding. And as sea level rise gets worse, we see it becoming worse and worse every day. Remember not so long ago, you know, you hear about 100-year floods, you'd see those rarely. Today, we see 100-year floods about 3-4 times a year. So it tells us that we've got to do something, and unfortunately, what Senator Spruill, the other delegation from Hampton Roads and Norfolk, and I are trying to do seems to be falling on deaf ears.
And if it's drained, where is it going? So we talked about one time a wall, I believe, a wall in certain parts of Norfolk. Will that help the situation? We don't want to be like it was in Louisiana, the problem they're having there. But Norfolk has a really serious problem when it rains. Let's say 3 days in a row, they have a real serious problem, especially with the tunnels. They call the tunnel, I'm right? The tunnels,
Yeah.
Norfolk. And when they flows out, well, you can't get into downtown because you got the one that goes on Campbell Road coming from Chesapeake, and you got the one coming from Norfolk, about the hospital.
Right.
Those two at all time, when those suction pump, whatever you call them, fails, you can't get in and out.
What about the river crossings like Elizabeth River? I know there have been issues around the toll there.
Well, tolls, I think, continue to be a problem that plagues Hampton Roads. You know, we've seen a study recently from Dr. Cook, who is a former president of Old Dominion University and an esteemed economist, who basically has finally done financial impact analysis and shows that the city of Portsmouth, for example, is significantly harmed by tolls. City of Norfolk, not too far behind. We're beginning to see similar types of problems with Suffolk and Isle of Wight. And until, you know, to my mind, until we address the problem of, you know, the ever-increasing tolling on the downtown and midtown tunnel in Hampton Roads, we're really going to have an increasing economic disparity in Hampton Roads. I mean, a lot of Norfolk's workforce comes from points west of the Elizabeth River. Those folks have to pay sometimes as much as an hour's income per day to get to and from work. It also affects people's ability to get to and from medical care, to and from school. I mean, it's really affecting significant portions of our populations, and I think as we move forward and as those tolls continue to rise, we really do have to find something meaningful and lasting to address that.
In Chesapeake, we don't have the money like they have in Portsmouth, and we're talking about the new expressway, the high rise, Chesapeake. They're gonna toll that, okay? We got the expressway going to North Carolina. They already told that. When I go down to Portsmouth to go see him, they told that. So in Chesapeake, you can't get nowhere out of Chesapeake unless you got to pay a toll. And the kids the toll that they have on the downtown, the midtown, downtown tunnel, when is it going to pay off? I would love for him or someone to tell me, since he's a lawyer, tell me when that thing going to be paid off. We don't really know.
Under current plans, Senator, I will tell you it's about 52 more years. That's how when it's going to get paid off, unless we can find a financial model to do it sooner. And I can tell you, I think the bigger problem for the Commonwealth is that everything now is looking at tolling as the transportation funding model. not just in Hampton Roads, but I-66 inside the Beltway in Northern Virginia, the I-81 improvements, which are sorely needed down in Southwest Virginia. Everybody's talking about tolling now. Seems to me that that's why we pay taxes. And tolling on top of taxes, to my mind, is simply a double tax. We should be able to get our financial house in order to get these projects built and get them paid for as, under our tax structure, instead of charging people even more to do this.
We talked a little bit about the military and its impact on your district and Tidewater. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, in our case, coming from the Oceana, from Chesapeake, the backside, and that we have a real major problem there because the Air Force, that's right there, coming from Oceana, they're having a problem with Chesapeake, flying across, people complaining about they're still building more homes out towards Chesapeake, going towards the Air Force base from Oceana, that flying across that zone that you can't fly across. They're having a problem there. Then also we had the military here, especially in Chesapeake, across from Portsmouth. They are having problems there as far as the shipyard, as far as being able to get in and out of there. But that we're having problems with that with the military. So we are saying that if we don't make provision for the Air Force getting in and out of Norfolk, Portsmouth, and Chesapeake, or allow the Navy to be able to have the shipyards there to repair those ships and all, we're going to be in a fix, and we can't do it. And that's the problem we're having.
Now, I understand that there is a fix to the tax conformity issue that passed the House, I believe, yesterday. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, what tax conformity does, Woody, just for viewers who don't understand it, basically every year, almost automatically, we conform Virginia tax law to federal tax law so that the exemptions, the deductions, all of that which you get under federal law are consistent with state law. Because of President Trump's tax revisions back at the end of 2017, we had to make substantial revisions to the state code as well. That has not been a simpler or straightforward process. After weeks of negotiations between both sides in the House, we were finally able, after a number of different votes yesterday, to pass out conformity, so that Virginia taxpayers can again conform their returns to federal returns, can get their tax returns, get their money back quickly instead of waiting until next fall. It was an enormously complicated and frankly a fairly politically fraught process. It took a lot of work and a lot of attention, and I'm glad as a member of the House Finance Committee that we're finally able to bring that home, because was not this year as simple as it looked.
Now, as I recall, that's going to allow for, depending upon one's income, a refund up to $110 for an individual and $220 for a couple.
Well, that's the basic refund. I mean, obviously, if you're able to claim deductions, exemptions, and so forth, you're itemizing your tax returns. It can be a great deal more than that. But the problem that we faced in the House was balancing, Trump's, tax plan, which arguably would give a lot more money back to the highest percentage of income earners rather than the lowest, trying to balance that out, to take some of the weighting from businesses. Under the federal tax law, it's called GILTI. I love the term, which is the ability of companies to take profits offshore and keep them offshore, so they don't have to pay taxes on them. We're trying to eliminate some of those loopholes as well. I mean, I think it really benefits every end of the Virginia economy, from the lowest income earner to the largest, and trying to make taxes fair for all Virginians.
And I think the Senate took up a similar piece of legislation
yesterday, and we had some concerns, but we looked at what the House. So finally, the House, they did something great.
I'm not used to hearing the senators say that. You heard it here first, Woody.
Yes. So that he's been very well, and we took that thing, we compromised what they've done, and it was great. But you know what? We're getting calls already from the citizens back home. But hey, I can't get my state tax done. What y'all doing? I can't get my state tax done. The federal is fill out and sit in. I'm not getting what I got last year. So we're hoping that this would help that.
Yeah.
That's why both houses had to have 80% of the vote in order for it to take effect immediately upon the government.
That's right. That's right. And yes, I think it's 80% to it. If it's an emergency, that means he can sign it right away.
Yeah.
You have some bill dealing with tobacco as it relates to
yes,
kids.
That's school. Right now in Chesapeake, you're not allowed to smoke in the schools. on the bus, in the grounds. This bill, we're having problems now with those e-cigarettes. That's the new type of stuff.
The jewels, they call it.
See, the young people know that kind of stuff. See, and we're saying that now we're saying because of that they cannot have those smoking at the game on school ground, also in the activities that they may have, even at the football games, that we don't want nowhere on the school ground. And because of that, because the study shows that those e-cigarettes, what you want to call them, now have as much effect on as the regular nicotine cigarette.
Now, where is that now? I have grandkids in school up in Fredericksburg, and they come home talking about the kids smoking those Juul e-cigarettes.
It's in the house, and so I have to beg him forgiveness and to protect him. It's in the house, but I'm hearing it will go well. That they want to amend it. That's why she had to go and see that they want to amend part of it. That they like the bill, especially this e-cigarette. But they showed me one of those things. I didn't know. I thought it was a cigarette lighter. It's a new type that you put fluid into it. You can put the bubblegum flavor.
You can put all kinds of different flavors into it.
Yeah, you know that stuff. Anyway, those flavors, you smoke that thing, it doesn't look like a cigarette, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And they were saying, but you got to have that nicotine part still there. And they said that's much harmful to everybody else, and that's why that bill that was put in with me, and it will get out of the house in some form.
And of course, you have a bill that would decriminalize, not make legal, but decriminalize the use of marijuana.
Yes, I do. I think it's time, Woody, that in Virginia we began to really look at decriminalization of marijuana. I think the vast majority of Virginians, we understand from opinion polls, would agree with that, both Republican and Democrat. Most of the states in this country right now, I think we're past 38 different states, have either decriminalized or legalized the use of marijuana by consenting adults. I think when you measure the harm that criminalizing marijuana does, if you're arrested with small amounts of marijuana, you lose any ability to get a job in public safety, any job with a security clearance. I mean, it really does foreclose a young person's job opportunities, career opportunities, for basically a personal choice. I think if we look at it as we did the prohibition about 100 years ago, what prohibition did was make criminals out of a lot of people who would never have otherwise broken the law for any reason except that they like to take a drink. Today, we take that for granted. But I think that the same analysis holds for marijuana. I think that the stereotypes, the information that we have had in the past, probably as we were growing up, that it's harmful, it's a gateway drug, it leads to other things, simply are not true. They're stereotypes which largely have not been borne out by scientific fact. I think it's time that the criminal justice system reevaluate the damage that the criminality of marijuana does versus the actual harm that consuming marijuana does.
Got about 30 seconds left, so I wanted to ask you what success will mean to you at the end of this session.
At the end of the session, to me, it means that those of us in the General Assembly, that we have did our best and we have served the public well. We did what they asked us to do. Get up there and get something done for the people to come up from Virginia.
Thank you. Good to see you both, Senator Lionel Spruill, Delegate Steve Heretick.
Thank you, Woody.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans. Mm-hmm.